I want to tell you something that might be hard to hear, but also deeply freeing. Your growth will not always be celebrated. In fact, sometimes it'll be met with silence, sarcasm, maybe even rejection. And it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because your evolution unsettles people who are invested in things staying exactly as they are. I remember a conversation where someone I loved said, "You're just so different lately." And they didn't mean it as a compliment. What they were really saying was, "I miss the version of you that didn't challenge me." Let's dive into it. Growth disrupts familiarity. People build entire emotional systems, friendships, family roles, even marriages around who we used to be. When we grow, especially when we begin to set boundaries or change patterns, we unknowingly challenge the roles others assign to us. Psychologically, it's called homeostasis. Systems resist change to stay balanced. So your transformation, it's not just personal, it sends ripple effects. And not everyone is ready to swim. And here's where it gets tricky. Many of those systems were never designed with your wholeness in mind. They were designed with survival, comfort, or status quo in mind, especially if you've spent years being the go-to, the peacekeeper, the caretaker, or even the quiet one who never made waves. I've seen this happen over and over, both in my research and in my own life. The moment someone starts to heal, to grow, to say, "That doesn't work for me anymore," there's often an immediate shift in how they're treated. Not always, but often. The people around them start to squirm, conversations change, eye contact drops, jokes come with an edge, and sometimes silence walks into the room wearing the clothes of punishment. Why? Because your evolution interrupts their emotional choreography. You are playing a part in someone else's comfort, whether you realized it or not. And when you stop playing that part, when you step off the stage and start writing your own script, it makes others question their roles, their patterns, and in some cases, their own avoidance. Now, here's something we don't talk about enough. This isn't just about haters or toxic people. We love that narrative because it's easy to dismiss and distance. But this kind of disruption, it can come from people who deeply love us, people who mean well, people who are good people. That's why it hurts so much, because love doesn't always come with the skills to navigate someone else's growth. Sometimes the people closest to you will say, "You've changed," and they'll say it like it's a bad thing. And that's when you have to pause, breathe, and remember, yes, I've changed, and I worked really hard for that. Growth is inconvenient for you and for others, but it is necessary. It requires you to stretch beyond what's familiar, and that stretch often pulls at the ties that bound you to who you used to be. It's like when you rearrange furniture in your living room. You know it'll feel better, more open, more functional, but for a few days you keep bumping into the coffee table because your brain is still walking through the old layout. People around you do the same. They keep trying to walk the old path, ask you for the same emotional labor, expect the same compliance, hope you'll be the same person they can lean on without considering your load. When you stop playing along, it makes them uncomfortable. And sometimes that discomfort turns into distance or disapproval, but that's not your cue to go back. That's your confirmation that you've moved forward. You're not abandoning them, you're reclaiming yourself. Rejection is often a reflection, not a judgment. When people push back on your growth, it often says more about where they're stuck than about where you're going. A study on self-concept threat from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology showed that when someone close to us succeeds, we unconsciously compare, and it can trigger fear, inadequacy, or jealousy. That emotional reaction, it's rarely about you. It's about what your courage exposes in them. I can't tell you how many times I've sat across from someone in tears, not because they did anything wrong, but because they felt hurt by the way someone reacted to their progress. They started therapy. They stopped overfunctioning. They said no for the first time in years. And what they got back wasn't pride or support, it was distance, or worse, criticism disguised as concern. Don't get too full of yourself. This is just a phase, right? You used to be more humble. The thing is, when you grow, you shine a light, not a spotlight to show off, but a light that makes it harder for others to avoid seeing their own stuck places. That kind of light can feel blinding when someone's lived in emotional dimness for a long time. It's not that your progress is wrong, it's that it's unfamiliar. And when people feel threatened, especially emotionally, one of the most instinctive reactions is to judge, reject, or diminish what they don't understand. It's human. And it's heartbreaking. Because when you're stepping into the most honest version of yourself, you hope others will meet you there. You hope they'll say, I see you and I'm proud of you. But what you often get instead is discomfort. And if that person hasn't done their own work, they'll project that discomfort onto you. It's worth repeating, rejection is often a reflection of unhealed wounds, of dreams deferred, of boundaries never set, and sometimes of fears so old and quiet that the person doesn't even know they're running the show. This is where we need emotional clarity more than emotional closure. We don't need to justify our growth to people who haven't learned how to value it, and we don't need to absorb their reaction as truth. But here's a practice I use when I feel the sting of judgment from someone I care about. I pause and I ask myself, is this mine to carry? If the answer is no, I lay it down. Because if I don't, I'll start shrinking, not to be small, but to be accepted, and the price of that is too high. See, the people who truly love you, even if they're confused, even if they're stretching, they'll eventually come around if they're capable of it. Love makes room, but the ones who can't or won't, their rejection doesn't mean you're wrong. It often just means you've grown beyond the version of yourself they were comfortable with. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk every part of your journey with you. Guilt is not a signal to shrink. We've been conditioned, especially women, to interpret guilt as a red flag. I feel guilty, so I must be doing something wrong. But growth guilt isn't the same as moral guilt. It's the discomfort of disrupting dynamics where you used to abandon yourself to keep the peace. You can feel guilty and still choose to grow. That's called emotional maturity. Guilt shows up loud and early when you start choosing yourself. And not because you're betraying anyone else, but because you're finally refusing to betray yourself. But if no one ever taught you the difference between healthy guilt and learned guilt, it can feel the same in your body, that tightness in your chest, the swirling thoughts of, maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe I should just let this go. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Sound familiar? Let's talk about it. There's this moment when you begin saying no instead of defaulting to yes, when you step back from roles you were never supposed to carry, when you begin valuing your time, your energy, your peace, that the guilt creeps in. Not because you're wrong, but because for so long you were rewarded for being small, agreeable, and available at all costs. You became dependable by being self-sacrificing. You became lovable by being low maintenance. You became easy to be around by swallowing hard truths and never rocking the boat. So when you start showing up in your full self, clearer, firmer, braver, it feels wrong, even when it's deeply right. That feeling of guilt isn't your compass, it's your conditioning. And the longer we stay confused about the meaning of guilt, the easier it is to slip right back into patterns that leave us depleted and disconnected from our authenticity. Research on self-conscious emotions like guilt and shame shows that guilt can be incredibly useful when it reflects a violation of our own values, like when we hurt someone or fall short of integrity. That kind of guilt invites us to repair, to grow, to reconnect. But growth guilt, that's different. Growth guilt is what happens when our evolution upsets someone else's expectations that we're likely benefiting from our silence or compliance. And here's the thing, emotional growth often means disrupting expectations that were never fair to begin with. I remember having a conversation with someone I deeply cared about after I had started setting clearer boundaries. And they said, I miss the old you. And I had to smile because what they missed wasn't me. They missed the version of me who never said no, who overfunctioned, who prioritized their comfort over my truth. And for a long time, that version of me felt easier. It kept the peace. It kept me liked, but it also kept me exhausted. So I've learned to sit with guilt, not to obey it, but to listen to what it's trying to teach me. And more often than not, it's not telling me to go back. It's telling me I've entered unfamiliar but necessary territory. Growth will trigger guilt, but guilt is not always a warning sign. Sometimes it's just the emotional residue of an old identity being shed. You don't owe everyone access to the new you. Not everyone gets a backstage pass to your transformation. Some people were only meant to love a version of you that didn't know any better, and that's okay. Growth includes grief. You can honor what was without returning to who you were. Let them remember you fondly. You're not obligated to stay for their comfort. One of the most painful lessons I've learned and watched so many others wrestle with is the realization that not everyone gets to come with you. Some people were only ever safe with your smaller self. They were at ease when you didn't ask for much, when you laughed off what hurt, when you shaped yourself to fit into their story instead of writing your own. And when you begin to grow, when you step into new levels of truth, healing, purpose, it disrupts that. It forces a quiet but undeniable reckoning. Can this relationship hold who I'm becoming? Or was it only ever designed to contain who I used to be? We don't talk enough about the grief that comes with growth. We talk about motivation, about rising, about courage, but not enough about the loss. Because there is loss. You will lose things. You will lose people. You will lose versions of yourself you once found comfort in. And that grief is real, even when it's right. I had friendships that couldn't survive the distance between my old self and my new boundaries. I've watched people I once adored slowly fade, not because of conflict, but because my evolution asked more of them than they were ready or willing to give. And for a long time, I tried to contort myself to keep them close. I'd downplay my wins, dull my light, speak in softer tones, second guess my truth, all to stay connected. But here's what I finally realized. Connection that costs you your growth isn't connection. It's a transaction. When you grow, not everyone will applaud. Some will feel threatened, some will feel abandoned, and some will rewrite the story to make you the villain because it's easier than facing their own discomfort. You can't control that. What you can do is decide who gets front row access to the new you. The you who's working hard to heal generational patterns. The you who no longer over-explains to be understood. The you who honors your limits, speaks your truth, and lets go when it's time. And here's something I wish someone had told me earlier. You can love someone and still protect your peace. You can honor what they meant to you without dragging their expectations into your next chapter. You don't have to defend your transformation to people who've made it clear they were only ever loyal to your limitation. Let them remember you kindly. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. You're not required to shrink so others feel tall. Not everyone is meant to see this version of you. And that's not cruelty, that's clarity. Your peace will feel loud to those who thrive in chaos. Peace isn't always quiet. In fact, to people who are used to dysfunction, people who thrive in emotional chaos, your calm might sound like thunder because you're no longer reacting, chasing, fixing, or over-explaining. You're just steady. And for those who feed on drama or control, that calm feels like rejection. Let's pause here because this truth is both tender and heavy. For many people, chaos is comfort. not because they enjoy suffering, but because it's what they know. Chaos becomes a coping mechanism, a way to avoid stillness, which often brings up everything they've been trying not to feel. And when you stop participating in that emotional chaos, when you no longer match their energy, jump into their urgency, or lose your center, they may interpret your peace as coldness or distance. But you're not being cold, you're being well. And here's the paradox. Sometimes the healthier you become, the more foreign you feel to people who haven't done that work. When you begin healing, you stop dancing around triggers. You stop absorbing moods. You stop joining conversations rooted in scarcity or blame. You stop playing the role of emotional firefighter, rushing in to rescue people from their own consequences. That kind of presence, the kind that says, I'm not available for chaos anymore, can be deeply unsettling to those who are used to pulling you in with guilt, urgency, or volatility. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about self-righteousness or cutting everyone off. This is about recognizing that peace is a practice. And when you commit to practicing it, it will challenge your old dynamics and sometimes even the people in them. I remember a woman I spoke with during a workshop. She had grown up in a household where yelling was love, control was safety, and silence meant punishment. As an adult, she began doing the work, therapy, boundaries, nervous system regulation. And one day she told me, I walked into a room where my family was arguing, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fix it. I just stood there, calm, present, and they all looked at me like I was the problem. Her peace disrupted the pattern, and that made her feel alienated, even though she was finally aligned with herself. This is where the real work begins, not just learning how to stay regulated, but learning how to stay rooted in your peace, even when others misinterpret it. You will be tempted to prove that you're still there for them, to step back into old roles just to soothe someone else's discomfort. But peace isn't passive. It's a boundary, a choice, a sacred refusal to betray yourself again just to keep someone else emotionally comfortable. And when you choose peace, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply about your well-being, your healing, your truth. And when that peace feels loud to others, you don't have to turn down the volume. You just keep choosing it again and again, even when it's misunderstood. Especially then, here's what I know for sure. Your growth is not the problem. Your voice, your boundaries, your peace, your clarity, they are not flaws. They are evidence that you've survived what tried to silence you, that you've chosen discomfort over resentment, that you're willing to lose approval before you lose yourself again. Will it offend some people? Yes. Will it disrupt relationships that were built on your silence or sacrifice? Probably. But the cost of staying small, of playing a role to keep others comfortable, is far greater than the discomfort of being misunderstood. You are not too much. You are not selfish. You are just finally becoming who you were meant to be before the world taught you to shrink. So give yourself permission to grow, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Not out of rebellion, not out of bitterness, but out of love, out of self-respect, out of the deep, unwavering belief that your wholeness matters. Because it does. You're not here to be digestible. You're here to be real. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them drift. You don't owe everyone access to the healed, rising, resilient version of you. You owe that to yourself. Good luck on your journey, not because you need it, but because the road to authenticity is wild, sacred, and worth every single step. Keep walking. You're doing beautifully.